and for nothing, pretty much. They had to pay
Rent.
they leased it, yeah, from the Crown without the permission of the Aborigines, of course. And but then they, in 1861, they had the Robertson Land Act, which allowed other people to select smaller properties, and they were often on the big properties of the squatters. And the squatters didn't really like that because the selectors picked the best bits. But yeah, but that's sort of the background of it.
Mr. Robertson has connections to Kiama Farm.
Oh, really?
I didn't go into it that
I
far.
think
It wasn't he an MP?
yeah, he was a premier eventually, but
Really?
I believe
Okay.
he came from Kiama.
Right.
So instead of Googling, I should have run you up, Ross.
Don't quite, but I'm pretty sure I've read somewhere.
Anyway, so you know what the squatter is and the selector now. And the other thing was that when I read it first, I thought I was getting really confused with the names. But it looks like Sandy Ross was the selector. The squatter's name was Mr. Black, and his son's name was Robert. And Ross's daughter was Jenny. So, okay.
Holy moly.
Remember,
What's quite a
she'll ask questions later.
I know.
Okay.
Radio. Notice it's Mr. Black, not just, you know.
Well, I don't know, they don't give his first name.
No, that's what I mean.
There'll be a reverend here to make paying attention.
Well, he's the original landowner, you see, that sense of entitlement.
Yes. The squatter saw his pastures wide decrease as one by one the farmers moving to the west selected on his run. Selectors took the water up and all the black soil round. The best grassland the squatter had was spoilt by Ross's ground. How many schemes to shift old Ross? He had racked the squatter's brains. But Sandy had the stubborn blood of Scotland in his veins. He held the land and fenced it in. He cleared and ploughed the soil, and year by year a richer crop repaid him for his toil. Between the homes for many years the devil left his tracks. The squatter pounded Ross's stocks and Sandy pounded Black's. As well upon the lower run was filled with earthen logs, and Black laid baits about the farm to poison Ross's dogs. It was indeed a deadly feud of class and creed and race, so fate supplied a Romeo and a Juliet in the case, and more than once across the flats beneath the Southern Cross, young Robert Black was seen to ride with pretty Jenny Ross. One Christmas time, when months of drought had parched the western creeks, the bushfires started in the north and travelled south for weeks. At night along the riverside the scene was grand and strange. The hill fires looked like lighted streets of cities in the range. The cattle tracks between the trees were like long dusky aisles, and on a sudden breeze the fire would sweep along for miles. Like sounds of distant musketry, it crackled through the breaks, and all the flats of silver grass it hissed like angry snakes. It leapt across the flowing streams and raced the parches through. It climbed the trees and lit the boughs, and fiercer grew. The bees fell stifled in the smoke, or perished in their hives, and with the stock the kangaroos went flying for their lives. The sun had set on Christmas Eve when through the scrublands wide young Robert Black came riding home as only natives ride. He galloped to the homestead door and gave the first alarm. The fire is past the granite spurn close to Ross's farm. Now, Father, send the men at once. They won't be wasted here. They won't be wanted here. Poor Ross's wheat is all he has to pull him through the year. Then let it burn, the squatter said. I'd like to see it done. I'd bless the fire if it could clear selectors from the run. Go if you will, the squatter said. You shall not take the men. Go out and join your precious friends, but don't come here again. I won't come back, young Robert cried, and reckless in his ire, he sharply turned his horse's head and galloped towards the fire. And there for 3 long weary hours, half blind with smoke and heat, old Ross and Robert fought the flames that neared the ripening wheat. The farmer's hand was nerved by fear of danger and of loss, and Robert fought the stubborn foe for love of Jenny Ross. But serpent-like the curves and lines slipped past them and between until they reached the boundary where the old coach road had been. The track is now our only hope, there we must stand, cried Ross, for naught on earth can stop the fire if once it gets across. Then came a cruel gust of wind, and with a fiendish rush the flames lit all the narrow path and lit the fence of brush. The crop must burn, the farmer cried, we cannot save it now, and down upon the blackened ground he dashed his ragged bough. But wildly, in a rush of hope, his heart began to beat, for all the crackling fire he heard the sound of horses' feet. There's help at last, young Robert cried, and even as he spoke, the squatter with a dozen men came racing through the smoke. Down on the ground the stockmen jumped and bared each brawny arm. They tore green branches from the trees and fought for Ross's farm. And then before the gallant band had beaten flames away, two grimy hands in friendship joined, and it was Christmas Day.
Oh.